Da dove viene la signora che parla con Davide?
È di Milano, credo.
Per l'accento?
Sì, ha un accento molto forte.
Quella signora mi ha regalato un ombrello, ma non so perché.
Mm. A caval donato non si guarda in bocca.
Buongiorno Marco, buongiorno tutti.
Ciao Martin, buongiorno e buongiorno a tutti. Come stai Martin? Come va oggi?
Molto bene, grazie, molto bene. E tu?
Bene, tutto bene, anche qui. È venerdì, quindi per noi è venerdì.
Per noi, sì, sì, per noi.
Sì, sì. Quasi finita la settimana. Ok, cominciamo subito. Let's start immediately with this, right? Let's see what we have this week. Preposizioni semplici. Are they
Mm,
actually semplici in your opinion, Martin, or is it a hard topic?
dipende, I suppose,
Mhm.
on which preposizioni we are parlando
Mhm.
about. Um, I don't
Good.
know. I'm guessing. I mean, there are some simple ones. I think it's more the use of them that is
Mhm.
not simple.
I agree completely, yes. And especially, well, first of all, semplice in Italian means easy, yes, but it also means that it's one word. So the meaning of simple preposition is
Ah,
just that it's only because then we have articolate, which is like
mhm.
del, della, degli, when you combine two words. Semplice just means it's one word. It does not mean easy. And I completely agree. Verbs are followed by different prepositions often, so that things that work in English don't work in Italian, and the other way around.
Constantly tripping over D and da.
Yeah, yeah. The and are
Um,
commonly confused. Some of them are very easy. We'll make a list later on. But what
mm,
we're talking about, as Martin said, are words like di, da, con, su, per. So in English, would be from, by, in, with. These kind of
mm.
words that we use a lot, and this dialogue has probably seven, eight of them, and they slightly change among languages.
Yeah, well, yeah, comincio con il primo.
Mhm.
Da dove viene la signora che parla con Davide? Okay, so dove we know is where, and
Sì.
viene we know from our well, we actually haven't done venire yet, have we? So,
No.
but so it's where I know that venire is to come. So it's
Mhm.
obviously it's going to be where are you come? Where is somebody coming from?
Correct.
Because it's viene and it's the third person. So da before it must be the from part.
Exactly. So da dove means from where, literally.
So da dove viene? La signora, the woman,
Mhm.
che parla. Parla we know from parlare, the third person, is he, she speaks. So where is the woman from? Che must be who,
Mhm.
and then con Davide, con must be with.
Right. Very good. Now you said everything perfectly. So a couple of interesting things here. Well, da, first of all, as you said, sometimes it's di in English. So off is kind of di and da often are used differently in Italian and English, but in this case, from where da translates from and by. So both would work in a way in here. And then something interesting you pointed out that che, which you translated as who, although technically in Italian it is that or which, right? Because we use who a bit differently in Italian than you use who in English. Let's say that we use it less. So when it's a conjunction, so connecting two different sentences, we usually use the word che and not the word chi. That would be who.
Yeah, and I've often wondered about that because, well, why? For a start, why would you do that
That's a good
when you've
question.
got a word for who?
That's a good question. We do have a word for who, but it's mostly used as a question in Italian. Usually, when you read chi or when you hear chi, it's a question.
Mm.
Whereas when it's connecting, it's a conjunction. Like in this case, connecting two sentences, che is usually what we choose. The reason I honestly don't know why. But I guess it comes down to our friends, the Romans, who probably at some point messed up with the language.
Would I be right in thinking that da always works with venire? So would you always say da dove viene? Da dove? Would it always?
I would think so. It's definitely a phrase that we can use quite often. Always is always a word that I'm scared of, so to speak, with languages, because there's always an exception. But I would say yes. You can say da dove vieni, where are you from? E vengo da, and then continue with the rest of the sentence. I would say yes. You can expect da to come together with dove, just like come and from are often together.
Mm. So I would say vengo dall'Inghilterra.
Perfetto, vengo, and in this case we will use a preposizione articolata because articles are overused in Italian. Vengo dall'Inghilterra. I come from the
Mm.
England.
Okay, sorry, I've made things more difficult now.
No, no, no.
Mm.
I think every question is good. This is the point of someone that's not a native Italian speaker because you notice things that I would not notice that are
Mm.
complex and not intuitive. So this is great, I think.
Yeah, I think con is an easy one.
Yeah,
It's the same as Spanish, isn't it?
yeah,
It kind of I always think it's connected. It's it is the it's the kind of like the etymology of it. It's with, isn't it? It's with something, always con. That's what it means in
right.
English words as well. The only thing in Italian that confuses me is occasionally when all of a sudden it becomes call.
Okay, this is a very interesting question. It's a bit advanced for what we're doing right now. Um, so I would just say the form col, C-O-L-L apostrophe, for example, is not used in modern Italian anymore.
All right, so moving on then. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Next line, di Milano, Milano, credo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so all of a sudden we've come from da, being from da dove. Also, we're going to di Milano,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to have to explain why
Yeah,
would you do that?
lovely question. Well, what do you notice different? We said that venire is often attached to da. Here we're not
And
using venire anymore. We're using
no,
essere, right?
essere.
Right.
Yeah.
So in English, you would say still I am from or I come from. You don't change the from. But to
Mm,
us, if you say io vengo da, that's fine. But if you say io
mm,
sono, I am, and you would rather say io sono di Milano, or io sono
mm.
milanese, even you could use, or io sono italiano, you could use the adjective, obviously. But if you want to use the noun, then often a di would rather be before rather than a da.
But that's just a peculiarity of Italian, isn't it?
I think it's just the way we form patterns with words. So often when
Mm.
we speak, certain words stick together, right? That's just the way we speak in a language. And essere usually comes with it. So if you say sono da Milano or è da Milano, it would obviously not be a huge mistake. Just as if you say it comes by England. Obviously, you know what I'm talking about.
Okay, so we'll remember that for future then. With Venere, you use da. With essere, you use di.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is a pretty advanced slight
Mm.
difference, so don't worry about this. But if you want to choose one, choose one. And go with the right preposition.
Okay, next line. Per l'accento. Well, l'accento obviously is almost the same word. It's the accent. It's accent, and you've got the L there, apostrophe, so it's the accent. But then per. I mean, I'm thinking that the translation of this is, are you understanding this through the accent?
Correct. Through the accent, you would say. We would
Mm.
say for the accent.
Pair there could be translated as quite a few different words in English, and I do find this with pair, it can always be translated in different ways.
Yes, per is definitely a lot of different things. So if you know Spanish, you would know that they have two very similar words. They're a nightmare for an Italian, which are por and para. Very similar words to an Italian ear, but very different meanings. Where por means usually you do something, through something, whereas para kind of points to the goal, the end goal of an action, right? So
Hmm.
these two words, both in Italian, can be and usually are translated with per. So per is both the mean, as in this case, through the accent, or the end of doing something. Mi alleno per vincere, I train to win.
Yeah, very good. Si ha un accento molto forte. Yes.
Yes.
Ha from avere. She has an accent molto forte, very strong.
Sì, qui non ci sono preposizioni, no preposition here. She has a very strong accent.
Mm,
Obviously, that should be pretty easy. That forte is also an interesting word in Italian because it can mean a lot of things, right? It can mean
mm.
strong, it can mean loud, it can mean even heavy sometimes. You know what the opposite, what the antonym is of forte?
Debole?
Yeah, debole, but I would say piano is
Oh,
basically the
okay.
opposite in all contexts, whereas debole is more like weak, the opposite of
Pianos
forte.
can be soft, it can be slow, it
Right.
can be, again, depending on context. Wow, your language is silly. I'm going to have to stop learning it.
Yeah, that's true. But it's interesting. You know what? We call it pianoforte, piano, and I guess it has to do with it can go
No,
fast, it can go slow, and all that kind of stuff.
I never thought about that.
Yeah,
Right, thank you.
yeah.
Very good. Ok, quella signora mi ha regalato un ombrello, ma non so perché. Ok, that woman,
Right.
uh, so mi ha regalato. So ha regalato, past tense, gave me or gave, and then me before it means gave to me un ombrello, which is easy to work out as an umbrella. Ma non so perché, and ma is one of your 412 words for but.
Correct. Yes. And we have that quella signora. Quella is something
Mm,
that we spoke about last week, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, as you said correctly, that lady, someone that is not close to us, we're pointing at something or someone in this case, that is not, who is not close to us. We have that verb that is ha regalato, which is not a present tense.
mm-hmm. Yeah, this is true.
It's a
Yeah,
past. It's a passato prossimo, which is the simplest kind of past, the most common that we have, at least as you probably know in northern Italy, because in the south and in the center of Italy they prefer the other past.
the one that's really, really difficult to
Correct.
because
Correct.
every single it's just wrong.
Yeah, it is just wrong. Every verb is irregular, and it's very many Italians often get verbs wrong. You can ask if you wanted to confuse an Italian, ask them the passato remoto of cuocere, to cook, and they would just go on crazy attempts to conjugate. We don't know how to do this kind of stuff, so we don't know. But we use this one. It's easy. Ha regalato, which even if we
Mm,
don't know anything about the past, it's kind of obvious how we make it, right? We have this a, which
mm,
is the verb avere, to have, and that regalato, to gift, which it would be the past participle, so gifted in English.
mm.
So it would be something like have gifted. That would be kind of the way it translates into English.
Yeah, understood. And then you've thrown in your weekly idiom here, which is a beauty.
Mm-hmm.
A caval donato non si guarda in bocca.
Mm-hmm. Molto bene. Okay, so you were telling me before you do not know this, although you can guess it's something similar in English. If you look at this,
Yeah.
how do you try and make sense of a sentence that you don't know? How walk us through your thinking process here.
I guess the first thing I'd try and see is are there familiar words in there?
Mm-hmm.
And if there aren't, then which words could you have a reasonable guess at?
Right.
Um, and I know that bocca is mouth. I think because of the Spanish, I think I learned that first. That's where I look at first, and then I would look at the verb, and
Uh-huh.
I would try to understand what the verb is, because from the verb you can guess the context of the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I know it's guardare, but it's also guardarsi, isn't it? Because well, it's not it's guardare, isn't it? Because si guarda is the passive, but
Very
um,
good. That's a passive
we'll just
form. Si guarda. Yeah.
yeah. So guardare is to watch or to look at or to see. I know that it's something about looking or watching in a mouth.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
And then the only other thing I saw in the sentence that I thought it jumped out at me was caval.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we get in English we get the word cavalry
Ah, right.
um, from the word cavallo,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously horse.
Right.
So when I threw horse and looking in the mouth and knowing that you're throwing idioms in every week, the only thing that came to me was you should never look a gift horse in the mouth.
No, but that's a good one. And sometimes idioms, as in this case, I didn't know. translate literally in other languages. Often that's not the case, as we know. So
Mm.
if you tell an Italian that piovono cani e gatti, it's raining cats and dogs, we're actually worried that someone is throwing cats and dogs because we don't use that idiom, so that wouldn't work. But in this case, I guess it translates the same way.
Can I ask, in Spain, is it not frogs and snakes?
I'm not familiar with the idiom, but I live in the Costa del Sol where it rains very rarely,
Ah,
so
right.
I would not know for, for
Yeah,
just
I think it
geographic
is.
reasons.
I think when you go out today, you need to ask someone that.
I will ask my neighbor from upstairs.
Yes, do that. I've heard he's a really friendly chap.
He's a lovely chap indeed. They didn't. I'm gonna cut all of that out for obvious reasons, but yeah,
In
I
case
was
he listens to the
in
podcast.
case you listen to the podcast. But yeah, so sometimes idioms translate literally, as in this case, and England also being very good with horses. Historically, you guys love horses, and you're good at training them and all that. I guess we share this idiom, or probably we translated it from English. Who knows? You do not look into the mouth of a gifted horse. Donato is synonym of regalato, donare being a synonym of regalare, verb from the first conjugation, regular. Not very commonly used anymore, but obviously this is an old idiom, and this is why we have this caval instead of
Mm.
cavallo, which would be the full word. And in Old Italian, they used to chop words shorter more commonly than we do today. So we would not say caval in everyday conversation, but it's an idiom. And we have that si guarda, which is a very interesting form. As you said, it's a passive, and it's kind of similar to the on in French, on. So it's like a we don't look in the mouth of gifted horse, but we do not say we, but rather one. I guess you would say in English one. One doesn't look in the mouth of a gifted horse. That's kind of that si guarda. But yeah, that was it for this week, and we're talking about preposizioni. And as you were saying, Martin, we have actually a little. When we were in school in Italy, we learned all of them, and the list goes as follows: di, a, da, in, con, su, per, tra, fra. We actually know all of them. Do you have something like this in English for in order to remember all of them?
That is something that you had to learn.
I don't know if you had to, but that's the way they teach you.
No, we were never taught anything like that.
Interesting. Okay, it's not that uncommon in Italy to learn uh, this way. For example, there is a little phrase made of acronyms to learn all the Alps around Italy in order.
All the what around Italy?
All the we have the Alps. That's how we call the whole mountain range. But it
Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah.
breaks down into 10, 12 different
Ah, Graian, Cottian. Yeah,
that
yeah.
that I can
Right.
actually I remember it. So it's ma con gran pena le reca giù. So
Ah,
marittime, cozie, graie, pennine, le pontine, retiche, carniche, Giulie. So I guess it works because 25 years later I still remember that.
wow. That's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
so it's not uncommon in Italy. But in this case, as we said, translation is not always literal. But let's try to translate them in English and see kind of how they would sound. Let's say the most common translation. So we
Mm.
start from D. How would you translate D in English?
I would say it's of.
Right, I agree. Of or the Saxon genitive, the apostrophe S form.
Yeah.
It's the most common. So, for example, il cane di Marco, the dog of Marco or Marco's dog. Very good. Okay. Then we have a, which is a funny one.
Yeah, because it should be at,
Right.
but it can also be in, can't it?
Right.
Um, and to, I suppose.
Correct. I would say that
Yeah.
at and to are the most common. We also have in, you're right, and especially followed by city.
Mm.
Sono a Milano, I am in Milan. But at and to, I guess, are the most common translation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. Then we have da, which is another interesting one.
Well, I would always think of Leonardo da Vinci, and
Good.
he's from Vinci, isn't
Very
he?
nice.
So that would be what would help me remember it's from.
Very nice. From and also would add by, often is translated as da in Italian.
But you get a lot of restaurants that are da
Yeah,
da Milano, da Mimi.
Esatto,
Uh,
esatto.
yeah, so that's not from.
That's not from. You can say that's by, but
Mm,
I guess we use da. As said, translations are hard to do literally, but we have this phrase which is andare da. For example, andare dal dentista, which translates as to go to the dentist. So before like a specific shop or a specific practitioner, professional such as a dentist, we will use da after andare. Vado dal dentista. So I guess that's where da Marco, da Piero, the restaurant.
mm.
That's why we use da. It's not quite from. I agree. It's more like at. I guess it would be.
I guess the thing is with all of these, it's when you see them in a sentence,
Right.
it's you should think about it, shouldn't you? You should,
Right.
uh, and eventually you'll get to the age of 147 and you'll have seen every single use of it, and
Right.
you're like, I could do it.
Right. Whenever people tell me this is tricky, I always tell them in English the biggest issue that you have as a learner, which you don't have as a native speaker, are what we call phrasal verbs, which I found is an expression that not a lot of English native speakers are familiar with. But
Mm.
do you actually use that in English? Phrasal verbs?
No, we don't, but
Right.
I understand what it means.
Right.
Yeah.
And to us, the way we learn verbs in English is
Mm,
that different prepositions or adverbs after a verb will completely change the meaning of the verb,
mm,
which is very natural to an English speaker, but it's very unnatural to an English learner. So you learn the difference between stand up, stand down, stand
mm,
on, stand
mm.
under, stand with, and
Yeah.
that small word will completely change the meaning of the entire verb. And some verb like stand, get, complete. You have probably 20 different meanings depending on what follows, which is very tricky for a learner.
Mm. Yeah, it is absolutely right. And it's one of those things that really it's again, like we talked about earlier, it's living
Yeah,
in the country
right,
and using them on a daily basis
right.
and click into your mind because that's what it is.
Right. Yeah, you're not gonna learn all of them on a book. You can try, but you're just going to go insane. Instead, when you hear one, two, three, four, five times, then you naturally going to use it again.
Mm,
It's kind of the same thing with prepositions. At the beginning, you get confused between them, and then at some point you will remember that you say vado dal dentista and not vado al dentista, which would be what you would think, and you just start using it correctly. So not to worry, just remember the most basic translation, the most common translation, and then you will go adding and improving and fixing small things later on. Very good. So we then have in. In is a pretty simple one.
yeah, in.
In is in. Very
But
good.
also, I guess sometimes could it be used as at?
As well, yes, we were talking about, especially after andare, venire, and all those verbs of movement, uh, everything can happen, just not, it's a bit tricky. But in general, in, I agree, is in
Mm,
both geographically and not like in the box, for example. So, and as well, cone. Cone is another simple
yeah,
one, with, as you
yeah.
said. Per,
Mm,
we go, which we briefly touched upon during the dialogue.
which is for.
For, most commonly for, correct?
Mm.
Sometimes through or by means of as well. Then we have su. Su has two big meanings, in my opinion. Do you know both, Martin?
Well, Sue, I would use as on,
On, correct.
um, but could it also be? Well, I'm trying to think now.
Well, I guess on translates both in English because su can mean above, like on top of
Mm,
something, like sul tetto, on the roof. But it can also mean about, right?
okay.
Un libro su Roma, a
Mm,
book on Rome or about Rome. And then we have the last two, tra and fra.
yeah. Which, why are the two words that mean exactly the same thing?
Yes, so tra and fra are the very same word. Um, so you can use them to say both between and among. We do not have the difference between and among in Italian. So both translate both, I guess.
But the use that I kind of always struggle with that I forget is when the used with time.
Mhm.
and it's when you if you say tra 5 minuti
Sì.
or in 5 minuti, it's a completely different meaning, and I always get them the wrong way around.
Okay, interesting, because I'm trying to think. Okay, tra 5 minuti means in 5 minutes, or 5 minutes from now. Arrivo tra
From
5
now.
minuti. And what is the
Mm.
in meaning in your opinion, Martin?
Well, in 5 minuti, so you can do something in 5 minutes.
Ah, right, right. That's true. I never actually thought about that. So yes, Martin is right that 5 minutes from now, arrivo tra 5
Mm.
minuti, whereas lo faccio in 5 minuti. I do it in 5 minutes, not saying from when. So, and there is one last thing that we should touch on about preposizioni, which is often they become preposizioni articolate, as we were saying. But not all preposizioni semplici become preposizioni articolate. So, okay, let's do this two examples, right? A preposizione can be simple or it can be complex, so to speak. Depends on what follows. For example, vado dal dentista, as we said. Dal is a preposizione articolata, right? Because it incorporates the article il. Da il becomes il. But we can also use the preposition da without the article, the simple form, which, for example, could be vengo da Milano. We do not put articles before cities, so we don't say vengo dalla Milano, but just vengo da Milano. So these are how we can use both phrases.
But with some we will do, won't we? Like vengo dal Inghilterra.
Yeah, with countries, not with cities.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just another rule, isn't it?
It's
There to
just
be
another
broken.
rule, isn't it?
Yeah.
I agree, yes. But okay, the rule with articles in Italian is when in doubt, always put an article because we use it more than English. If in English there is an article, there's always going to be one in Italian. And if there
Mm.
isn't one in English, probably there is one in Italian. So cities are an exception.
And when they're used with the article, generally it's going to be exactly like what we talked about with quella and questa, isn't it? It's going to be formed in a very similar way, isn't it?
Exactly, yes. So the article will be the normal article that we have in that specific form. So masculine, feminine, singular, plural. Which, for example, dal would be singular masculine, dalla singular feminine, dagli masculine plural, and dalle feminine plural. So very similar to quella, specific quello, which behaves really the same way. And they become one word, so it's not going to be dagli separately, but it's going to become one word and be dagli, for example, for masculine plural. Now, the point is not all preposizioni semplici become preposizioni articolate. So, di, das, a, das, da, das, in as well. But then con, as we were talking about before, usually doesn't. So we would say con il and not col, C-O-L-L, apostrophe, which would be the old form, the old Italian form. The same happens with su, das. And then per, tra, and fra also do not do that. So per il, tra il, e fra il.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's cleared quite a few things up for me. Is that's
Well, that's the idea.
yeah, it's very helpful.
Very nice then. Ok, so that was it for today. Questo è tutto per oggi. E ci vediamo settimana prossima. Ci vediamo tra una settimana. Even better.
Sì, tra una settimana, sì,
Yes. Molto bene.
capisco.
Grazie a
Grazie
tutti.
Marco,
Grazie a te.
grazie agli
Sì.
ascoltati,
Ascoltatori. The listeners.
ascoltatori, grazie agli ascoltatori.
Molto bene, grazie agli, preposizione articolata, ascoltatori.
That was hard to say.
That was not easy to say, I agree. It's a bit of a long word. But yeah, see you all, or hear you all, or you will hear from us presto.
Ci sentiamo dopo.
Ci
Sì?
sentiamo dopo o ci sentiamo presto? Sì.
Ok.
Ciao!
Ciao.